This is a brief tutorial of the single fiber EMG Plus software in Sierra Summit version 3.1. To get into the single fiber EMG software, you can either get there with a shortcut key. If you're already in EMG, you can just click single fiber EMG Plus and it'll bring up this muscle in the single fiber protocol. Otherwise, go into your navigator and go into your EMG tab and then pick single fiber here and then pick the muscle that you want to do here. When you open up the software, you should see 5 windows displayed. There's also different views. You can toggle between view 1 or view 2, whether you want to see histograms or actual numerical results, depending on what view you use. This first window is your live EMG display. This is where you'll be seeing your live data. This window, you will only see the triggered traces display here, and you'll see our automatic peak detection. And then in this window, the peak plot window, you'll be seeing the different peaks that are being detected cascading down here, and currently it's showing up to 150 samples. In this window, you're going to see all your samples on top of each other. So you'll see all traces here, and then of course your results here. So I'm going to open up a buffer just to play back some data. So your base unit, your volume controls are the same as EMG. You will use the yellow knob to run and stop, or you use the run stop button. And what you have here is, once you get a motor unit that's firing, the yellow trigger line will automatically adjust to capture that motor unit. So it'll automatically move up to find the highest peak of that motor unit that's replicating. And then in our trigger traces window, you'll see that motor unit displayed along with all the peaks that we are automatically detecting. We can use the blue knob to turn down the gain if we want to. The sweep can be changed by pushing down the blue knob, or actually for this window we could just increase or change the sweep that way to make sure we're getting all the peaks. So here we're seeing 4 peaks cascading down, and we have at least 150 samples of each, so we'll go ahead and stop that acquisition. Just hitting the switch, the yellow knob, or the run stop. And now we can see our peaks here. It found 4 peaks. If you want to add a peak, maybe you thought that this was a valid peak, you can just draw a box around it, and it will add that peak, and it will add it to our peak plot here as well. If we decide we don't want that peak, simply go to the peak plot and uncheck that peak. If we don't want this peak here, this 4th peak, that's the red one, we can come over to our peak plot and uncheck that peak as well. So now we're just looking at 3 peaks. If we want to adjust the window size, you can drag down if you don't want the first samples included, or you can drag up, or you can drag left or right to exclude or include any outliers. In our all traces window, this is where you can draw an exclude box, and anything in this red box would be excluded. So you can draw an exclude box. If you want to bring anything back or refresh this buffer to what the original analysis was, simply click the reanalyze button in any of these windows, and that will reanalyze back to what it started with. So here it brought back the original peaks that it found and all the original samples. So again, to exclude any peaks, if I don't want this last peak, I'm just going to uncheck it. If I want to adjust my window, I can adjust here, or in and out, or up and down. And then I can exclude here using just an exclude box by clicking and dragging with my mouse. If I do want to see all the samples in this window, I can either drag down. If I hover here, this appears, and I can drag down and see all the samples here. The top trace here is the purple line. That's the one I'm on. And this is all the traces in that page. So I'm seeing a page here. So I'm looking at about the second to the bottom page. This purple one is the top trace here. So I can quickly either drag through here or drag through here to see those. You can right-click on a trace to exclude any individual trace just by hovering and right-clicking. That excluded that trace. Or you can use your pink knob to scroll through the traces, and then pushing down the knob would exclude the trace, and pushing down again would re-include the trace. If there are any traces that were automatically excluded, you would see those marked in red here. If you saw blocking in a particular peak, you could just click the box blocking here. If you're using reference values, we'll be detecting blocking automatically. If you're not using reference values, you'll need to check that box when you see blocking in a particular peak. So if I'm happy with this sample, then all I have to do is hit the run stop again. That saved that sample. Every time I run, it's saving the sample and the buffer, and I'm collecting more data. So here's another buffer, another motor unit coming in. The trigger's automatically adjusting. If I want to adjust that trigger manually, I can turn the yellow knob, but as soon as I turn that yellow knob, it's now manual, and it's going to stay where I left it. So I think it's best if you don't touch the yellow knob and just let our auto trigger automatically find that highest peak of the replicating motor unit. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that acquisition, and I'm going to look at my peaks and see how I like them. I'm going to look at my peak plot window and decide if I want to adjust any of my windows. They all adjust together. So for example, in this particular trace, maybe I wanted to just compare these first two peaks, and I didn't really like the rest of the peaks. So what I would do is I'd first pick which peak I wanted to be the triggered peak, because right now it's auto triggering on this peak because that's the one that's giving the least amount of jitter. So I'm going to say I actually want it to trigger on this peak, and I just want to uncheck these two. So now I'm just looking at these two peaks, and maybe I just wanted, just this portion of those two peaks. And I like that. I come in here, and maybe I want to deselect any noisy traces. I can quickly do something like this. And then I'm going to start a new analysis on the same buffer because I want to actually analyze those other peaks together as well. So I'm going to go to New Analysis, and now it made a copy of that. So there was the one I just did. This is a copy, and on this one, I'm actually going to either readjust my trigger or just refresh my buffer. So now I see all of my peaks again. And in this peak, I actually want to just compare this peak and this peak. So I'm just going to uncheck these two. I can. And maybe on this one I liked the first 100 but not the last like 20 or so. I'm going to adjust my window up. So here I'm just looking at these two peaks, and I can come in here and deselect anything I want. If I want to use this window to exclude some outliers I don't like, I can do that. And now there's my second peak, and now I can go ahead and run stop and get a whole new run if I want to restick with the needle. So in this window is where all our results are. These are our runs. So our first run had two peaks, 1.1 and 1.2 that we collected. Our second run we collected two peaks, or actually one peak. Our third run we collected one peak. And then our fourth run we're detecting 4 peaks. We're collecting 3 points of data. So we'll go ahead and stop that. And again, here's our live window. You can see here in the buffer that we are analyzing this portion of the buffer. If I actually saw something back here that I liked, I could either keep this and start a new analysis, or I can just come back. Maybe I wanted to analyze from here, so I'm going to drag back to here and reanalyze, or just readjust the buffer. And now I have the analysis of this portion of the buffer, which was starting where I started, and then 150 points, sample points, because that's what I have this window set to here. So here's my motor unit here. If I want to adjust my sweep, I can do it here. If I want to add a peak, just draw a box around the peak I want to add. You can't add all peaks if the peaks are too far out of our parameters, which are defined in the cogwheel. It's not going to let you add it if the frequency is too low, or the separation or the latency deviation is too much. So here we have the peaks. Then we can come over here. Maybe we actually don't like this peak, so we'll go ahead and uncheck that. And maybe we don't like that one. So now we have the 3 peaks. We can adjust our window, clean up any data we need here, and then run again. I'm going to pick a different buffer this time. And let's see if we can get something with jitter in it. So here I'm collecting. I'm getting 2 peaks, and one with obviously jitter and blocking here. And here I can see in this window my 2 peaks. Once I have enough samples, I'll go ahead and stop. And now I can come through and pick my window, and maybe I didn't like the first few that I collected, so I can drag down a little bit. And here I can clean up my results a little bit just by drawing an exclude box here, and wherever. And so I still have 123 samples of the original 138 samples. I can quickly drag through here if I want to see each individual one. This obviously has blocking, and so I'll go ahead and check this box that notes that it has blocking. If I had reference values plugged in here, it would probably already notice that and check blocking for me. And so there's my results for that for that peak. Down in my results table at the bottom, I can see the percentage of my runs that had increased jitter and the percentage of my runs that had blocks. That's what these two numbers are here. Then you can see your potential pairs, overall jitter, normal pairs, and fiber density. So that's a brief run through of the single fiber EMG software. Again, like the rest of our software, if you see a blue cogwheel, you can click in it, and that will give you the settings for that particular window. So each window has its own cogwheel because those has different settings that you can adjust.